Now, the so-called Friends of Syria group is meeting once again, this time later today in Rome. Syria's opposition coalition will hold pretty crucial talks with foreign powers, and they include the new US Secretary of State, John Kerry. He has said the opposition needs more help. All this as the UN warns the growing number of Syrians fleeing the country's brutal conflict. 4 million and rising every day is outstripping the international community's ability to help. Let's take you now live to LA. Josh Lockman is a lecturer in international law at the University of Southern California and a Middle East expert. Josh, what kind of hopes are riding on these talks, and realistically, what do you think is going to come out?
Well, it's a great question. I think what we're seeing right now is cautious optimism from both the American side, which tried to coax and persuade the Syrian opposition, the Syrian National Council, back into the conference essentially in Rome, and from the opposition in Syria as well, along with key regional allies, both in Europe and in the Middle East, namely Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, which have largely been shouldering the support from a military standpoint for that opposition. I think going into this conference and this meeting in Rome, we would hope to see a change in policy from the Obama administration with much more support, whether defensive or offensive military aid, given to the Syrian rebels. Because really this is an opportunity, again, for the administration, for the U.S. and the West, to remove what is an odious regime which has killed, as you mentioned, nearly 70,000 of its own civilians, thousands more missing and injured, and hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, fleeing the borders now and going into Turkey, Jordan, and Iraq. So I think that this is also an opportunity for a geostrategic alignment where Iran and Hezbollah will suffer a blow. And I think the Americans recognize this, and that's what we'll see come out, hopefully, of the conference on Friday.
Josh, I guess so much of the world is looking at the pictures coming out of Syria and saying somehow these people have to be helped, but yet everybody is terrified of another Iraq, another Afghanistan.
Right. The legacy of Iraq and Afghanistan loom largely over any intervention in Syria, especially with the U.S. president, with President Obama, very mindful of the legacy of his predecessor, George W. Bush, and does not want to enter into a quagmire under the so-called Pottery Barn rules that former Secretary of State Colin Powell mentioned. If you break it, you own it. In many ways, in my opinion, frankly, the Americans were short-sighted in the policy they sought as far as whether to intervene. If intervention had occurred much earlier, I think the United States, along with key allies, could have tipped the balance pretty quickly in favor of the rebel forces. But for many reasons, there was reticence and reluctance to intervene militarily because of the shape and structure of the Syrian opposition. That being said, I think now is the time for action. And again, the United States must demonstrate that regardless of kind of the reduced footprint it seeks really throughout the Middle East, it still remains the most indispensable actor in the region and has to exert the type of influence that is necessary and not just outsource its policy to Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, which it's largely done so far.
Josh, just briefly, if you can, are we perhaps expecting too much from the kind of public declaration? Is it likely there is much more going on behind the scenes with special forces, with satellite surveillance than we know about?
Yes, it's an excellent question. I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes here than meets the eye. Obviously, Secretary Kerry has taken the message that Assad must step down, but that political transition is the only way forward. But I think in many ways, the Obama administration, along with its allies in Europe and the Middle East, want to tip the balance with clandestine military intelligence aid in favor of the rebel forces in Syria, really to influence Russia, which could be the kingmaker in this crisis, to jump and flip from the Assad regime and support the West's position here, because frankly, Assad is a dead man walking. He is inevitably going to fall. His regime is going to fall, and I think the sooner the better that the international community intervenes decisively to hasten that outcome.
Josh Lockman, thank you very much.